Howdy y'all, Fuzzy Biker here in the Fuzzy Biker Garage. I just got back from a trip to Colorado on my hot rod Royal Enfield Super Meteor 650 right there. And boy, what a trip that was. I'm going to tell you about the bike itself, about the mods we did to the bike to make it a good bike for road running and touring, because this is a tour bike. And we'll talk about the performance of the bike on the ride there, once we got there in the mountains, how it did in altitude and things like that. I'll talk to you about the gear I took with me to make the trip. And by the way, I got all the gear right here. Everything that I took with me is right there, except for the jacket and the helmet that I was wearing. Then we'll talk about a couple things that made the trip, you know, the unsung heroes of the trip, as I like to call them. Okay, so the bike itself is a 648cc air-cooled parallel twin made by Royal Enfield. It's a single overhead cam, 4-valve per cylinder engine. Here's the oil cooler right here. Puts out about 47 horsepower, 39 foot-pounds of torque. That's about 52, 53 Newton meters, something like that. Has a wonderful 6-speed transmission. Here's a shifter. You've noticed already it's got forward controls. That's a big deal, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The tank itself is supposed to hold about 15 gallons of fuel. That's about 4 gallons. Seat height in stock form. This bike has a custom seat. Seat height in stock form is 29.1 inches, or about 470 millimeters. I did add this Royal Enfield custom touring seat, and I did it right before I left on the trip. There's assemblage right there. So I put that seat on a Monday, and I left Tuesday morning. Put the seat on late Monday afternoon. So I had about 50 miles on it. I took the bike for a ride that night to see how it was going to work. And I got stories to tell you about that hot rod. The bike is has about a 50, I think it's a 59-inch wheelbase, or about 1,500 millimeters, which is good for stability. It's got these wonderful 43 millimeter upside down forks made by Showa. And I got a lot of good to say about those too, by the way. I think it's 4.4 inches of travel, which is about 109, 120, something like that, millimeters. Got this beautiful 320 millimeter disc brake on the front with a dual piston bi-bree caliper. That worked excellent in the mountains. We'll talk about that too. On the rear, we've got a single disc, 300 millimeter, again with a dual piston bi-bree caliper. And look, I want to show you this. Turn that key, bag pops out. Isn't that handy? Just so simple. These are GV bags, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. I already mentioned the bike's weight, 530 pounds. That's with a full tank of gas. That's about 240 kilograms. Mods that I did to this motorcycle to make it good for touring. The bike I bought was the base model Royal Enfield Super Meteor 650. Didn't have any add-ons on it. First thing I did was add this wonderful windshield. It's made for the bike. That windshield performed excellent. It kept the wind off of me from, I'd say, about here down. My helmet was in good clean air. We'll talk about that here in a little bit too. Very comfortable. Kept the fatigue. It didn't have a lot of fatigue because of it. Next thing on front that I added, these are tire pressure monitoring system things. I've got that up here on my dash. Oh, it's already showing. This way, every time I get on this bike, I know my tire pressure is good. These are my Royal Enfield foot pegs. They're about 2.5 times wider than the stock ones. Now, you wouldn't think that would make a lot of difference, would you? It does. It gave me a lot of options for foot placement. It was just more comfortable than an arrow peg. I really appreciated those pegs. I knew I would like them because I also have them on my Classic, and that bike has about 7,500 miles on it. By the way, over 9,500 miles on this motorcycle already. Running back here, I've got these GV bags. They're detachable. I think I already showed you that. They're looking a little dirty right there because they've just had a 2,000-mile bike ride. I think they are water resistant. I don't know if they're waterproof. There is a cover that goes for it in the rain. I don't think it's going to make any difference. They're lockable with this. They're removable with this. What I do on a trip is I take those off, bring them into the house, lay them out on the table, load them up, pack them up, and then just walk back out and put them on here. When I get to where I'm going, when I got to Colorado, I ran them into Mark's house, put them in the bedroom. It had all my luggage right there. It was just that simple. I did put this rack on the rear of the bike. It's a Hepco and Becker, very nice rack. The seat really wasn't made to work with it, but I did make it work. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But the rack is something I use. I've got a bag over yonder that I put on the back of this bike if I need more luggage capacity. I did not bring that bag this time because I had so much room with everything I had already that there really was just no need. Then there's the touring seat, and I already told you about that. I put it on a Monday afternoon. I took the bike for my trip. I left Tuesday morning. So how'd the seat do? It did really well. It's amazingly, it seemed like it was broke in already. I drove all the way across Nebraska with it without any trouble, 682 miles the first day. Drove all over Colorado. We drove about 650 miles in 3 days. And then I drove the 790 mile trip home on that seat, and I was comfortable. It's got this dual material here, this kind of ventilated bottom end. I don't know if they're actually ventilations or not, but they look like it. It's got different foam padding. It's a little wider. This is really a big deal. It's got the support right here. And if you understand what I'm trying to tell you here, there's a need for that. It keeps you more comfortable. Just go with that. All right. Next thing I want to talk about are the shocks. That's one of the unsung hero things. Those YSS shocks that I got back there. Now, those are not cheap, but I knew I was going to be doing a lot of long rides on this bike. And I thought, this is a motorcycle that deserves that kind of a product. And I'll tell you right now, they were fabulous. Every mile of this trip was better because of those shocks. And I really didn't think about them for several days. And I think it was the second to last day I started thinking, hey, you know, the ride has been splendid the whole time. These are very smooth. The handling was improved. They work good on bumps. They work good. I just can't say enough good about that. And then there's the net on the back. I think that's the last item. And that worked really well. A little honorable mention. Can you see that right there? What is that? So about the trip. Fuel mileage. Let's start with that. When I headed out of here, the wind was against me. It was actually coming straight from the south, or it seemed to be. And I fought that wind for 300 miles going west. And I got about 40 miles a gallon average, and that's terrible. I thought, good grief, what have I got myself into, you know? Got halfway across Nebraska. The wind was coming from the south. Stopped for a break, got back on my bike, and the wind was coming from the north. What had happened? I don't know. Gas mileage went up slightly, but it didn't improve that much. Speeds I was going at on Interstate 80, going across Nebraska in both directions, I tried to hold it at about 80 miles an hour on the Speedo. So I'm guessing that's about 76, 77 miles an hour. So how about when we were in Colorado? Mileage, while we were cruising through the mountains and doing all that neat fun stuff, I think it was in the high 50s for the most part, sometimes the low 60s. Very good. Then on the day I rode home from Frisco up to Laramie, Wyoming, is about 170 miles, 160, 170 miles. On that tank of gas, I got 66 point something or another miles a gallon. I really don't know why. Heading from Laramie and then across Nebraska, the first couple tanks I got about 55, 56 miles a gallon. The last two tanks I got about 44, 45 miles a gallon. And I attribute that to the wind stopped blowing. I didn't have the wind at my back as much. And I was probably riding harder, you know, giving it more gas to get home. So how about comfort? I was comfortable. I was very comfortable on this motorcycle. And I'm going to give a lot of that to the position, the seating position, very good seat that I put on there, the shocks, the forward controls. I'm the kind of guy that gets a little bit of knee pain on long rides, have to put my leg out to get it stretched out. I didn't have any of that problem with this because of the forward controls. I use my front pegs, you know, like this, like this, like this. I mean, I just did it all. And so I had lots of foot options for that. I also use my back pegs. Next thing I'd say is the windshield. You know, that kept the wind off of me very well. The bars reach to you. You've got these very comfortable grips. So this bike is really set up for touring. You got the long wheelbase. It's a heavy bike. It was very stable. It didn't get blown around a lot. It just did very well. I was very happy with that kind of performance. So how about in the mountains and the handling of the motorcycle? I think she did well. You could tell it was a cruiser. You could tell it wasn't a handling motorcycle. My good friend Mark, he was on his Royal Enfield shotgun, which is handled superbly. He also had a performance upgrades on his, you know, pipes, DNA air filter, I don't know what else, but he definitely had more power. His bike weighed less. He also weighs less than I did. But the handling of this motorcycle overall was very good. I did notice it plowed just a little bit in the tight curves, especially going downhill. The brakes worked very well on those roads. Going uphill, it was so, you know, you had to push with your arms, but you could get the handling out of it. You know, it's got this rakish front end. I have a little more rake than the shotgun does, but it worked very well. It just took a little more work, and I knew the bike would be like that. So that's kind of a compromise. You know, I got this great interstate handling for the long rides. So when I bought the bike, the idea was I was going to do these long runs across interstate, miles and miles of interstate. I want to go to the East Coast, the West Coast, Colorado, things like that. And I wanted a bike that would perform well and be comfortable in the interstate, and I've got that in this. Now, what I found was on the mountain roads, the tight twisties, things like that, I was able to push the bike and get the kind of handling I needed. It worked very well. I was very happy with that. How about the engine in the mountains at altitude? We got up to over 12,000 feet. We went to Fremont Pass, Independence Pass, Monarch Pass, and the most beautiful road of all, Cottonwood Pass. And the bike performed admirably. We held more than road speeds, more than the speed limits. We were passing cars. We had loads of power. It was diminished power compared to what it would be at the lower altitudes, but it had plenty of torque and plenty of power. I never once thought, my gosh, what a dog. The bike did well. I was able to keep up with Mark on his shotgun pretty good for the most part. He was nice to me. There were a couple times when he started pulling away, you know, but like I said, the bike weighs more, I weigh more. He has upgrades for performance. Oh, and by the way, I did not put pipes on mine. I left it stock because I wanted it quieter. And that's something I'm rethinking. Now here's a biggie, speaking of performance, how did the bike do in Denver? I got to Denver about 5 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. I found myself in rush hour traffic. It was not the worst rush hour traffic I'd ever been in, but it was certainly bad enough. The bike did well. It braked well, it handled well, it powered well, it did it all, and I was very happy. I have had this motorcycle through Kansas City a couple times, now through Denver. The bike does well. Des Moines, Iowa, Omaha, it performs well in the city. It's just a good performer. That engine has just enough power to do everything you need. It really is a good product. The next thing that really made the trip, and I think this is every bit as important as the motorcycle and all the mods I made to the bike. And you know what I'm going to say? It's gear. It is. It's the gear. And I want to start with this helmet. I have had many helmets in my lifetime. This is by far the best helmet. Oh, it's a little dirty, isn't it? The best helmet I've ever owned. It's a Shoei Neotech 2. I got it about, I don't know, a month ago now. I've got probably 6,000 miles on it, probably more than that. And it just performs admirably. So why is this such a big deal on a trip like this? Well, it's comfortable. It's just that's the first thing. It's comfortable. It's so comfortable. Most helmets have to be broken in over a course of weeks. This thing, you know, it was so comfortable that when I wore it in the beginning, I thought it doesn't need a break-in. And I had just a little bit of ridge pressure. That's totally gone away. I wore this the other day for 780 miles. I put it on at 9:30 in the morning, Iowa time, and I got back to Iowa 12 hours later. The helmet was never a burden. I never thought, oh, I got to get this helmet off, or, you know, it just was that comfortable. And it's got a very good interior. It's relatively quiet until you start opening the vents, and even then your ears are in a good spot. The venting is excellent. That's open, that's closed, easy to use. Up here it's got a 2-position vent, so that's open, that's medium, and that's off. It lets a lot of air in. When you open those vents, you can feel it. I mean, you really can. And the other thing, and this is really important, and I couldn't do this on any of my other helmets, you can just barely crack it like that. That lets just enough air in if you want, just a minute amount of air, and it you know, gives you that little extra comfort. Another piece of equipment that is very important for a ride like this is a good riding jacket. Now what I have is the Royal Enfield Nervic jacket right here. It's armored. It's got CE1 armor in the back, CE2 armor in the shoulders and in the elbows. It's got this Cordura fabric. It's CE protection. I don't know what that means. And the whole jacket is CE certified. The whole jacket, not just the shoulders or the padding or a certain spot, but the whole entire jacket. And it's got these, look at this, good ventilation. It's got this big back panel right now. I can put that jacket on, and as the day warms up, I take the liner out. I can wear that jacket up to about 85 degrees. You know, I can open the back vents. I can open up the sleeves, which are closed right now. And I can also open up these front vents right here on the front of the jacket. I love that thing. That is well worth the money. So that, the helmet, and then I carry 3 pairs of gloves. I've got a winter set of gloves that are, let me think about this, Tourmaster Polartex, I think is what they're called. They're gauntlet gloves. If it's cold out, I put those on in the morning. I've got a mid-weather set that are good from about 45 degrees or up. They are Royal Enfield Alpine Star V2 gloves, and they work very well up to about 70 degrees. And then over that, I put on my mesh gloves. I have 2 sets of those. I have a Royal Enfield set that are, you know, the air blows right through. I just love them. Couldn't find them. I don't know where I misplaced them. I'll have to look for those. On this trip, I took my Noru ventilated gloves, and they were fabulous. So there's something I want to throw in really quick, speaking of gear. When I was going across Nebraska, like I said, this has a 4-gallon gas tank, about 15 liters. I kept having range anxiety. You know, oh, where's, you know, the Nebraska is a long state. Over half the ride there was in Nebraska. And You know, where are the fuel stops? Am I going to be able to make it? I was talking to Mark, my friend out in Colorado, about that, and he lent me his. It's under here. There's a gallon of gas right there. That is a giant loop. I think that's what it's called. Giant loop gas bag under there. And that is literally 1 gallon of gas. Unsung hero of the ride, the touring seat from Royal Enfield, and this absolutely fabulous YSS suspension. That really made the trip also. I think that's key to the success of the whole thing. So can this bike tour? Yes, it can. This baby, I love it. It worked very well. It worked better than I ever could have imagined. You want a good tour bike for these kind of rides? There it is, right there. I love that thing. So how about the ride? Let me tell you about the ride. Hopped on the bike, hit the interstate. It's just a couple miles down the road from here. And I stayed on that interstate all the way to Denver. And oh my gosh, what a ride that was. Nebraska is a thankless road, especially in a hard wind. I did that all the way to exit. I crossed Nebraska all the way to exit 102, I think it was. Got on Highway 76, took that down. And by the way, from 76 to 70, Interstate 70, that isn't much fun either. It's a little more scenic, but not much. Got to Highway 70, took that west, and through Denver. That was, well, I told you, I got in the rush hour, and that was, you know, the bike did well. I could have gone without it. Got past Denver and things just started to pop. Highway 70, you know, I've heard it before. Highway 70 is supposed to be the most beautiful interstate in the Americas, and I believe it. I mean, the parts, I went from there to Frisco. From Denver to Frisco was about 70 miles. Through the mountains, went through the Eisenhower Tunnel. Just, you know, wow. Absolute. Driving through Colorado from Denver west on Highway 70, that is a trip in itself, and I think I'm going to check into something like that. Got to Frisco, beautiful cabin, amazing home, fabulous place, 9,200 feet I think is the altitude. You know, 682 miles that day I think I rode. Next morning we hopped out, we did a short ride. We went to Fremont Pass, which was right across the road from what's called the Climax mine. They mine something called molybdenum or something like that. Anyway, it's some sort of metal. That was kind of neat. Then from there we went to Independence Pass, which I think was 1,000 feet higher. Now here's something you need to know when you do these things. And you need to also think that other people there are going through the same thing. I got lightheaded. You know, we did this beautiful road. It was just amazing all the way up to the top of the pass. I could barely breathe when I got up there. Now I'm a pretty poorly guy, you know, and so it took a little effort. Had to really pay attention. Probably should have waited a day or two before we went up there. We rode down from there, got caught in a little bit of rain, headed back to Frisco, saw all kinds of neat things. The rain wasn't a problem. It was pretty good. The next day we hopped on bikes and we did this beautiful long ride. I mean, absolutely gorgeous ride. Mark he's from Colorado. He lives in Colorado. He has a house in Colorado. And he took me on, I think it was 77 and 11. We ended up in Gunnison where we had a meal at a place called The Dive. And wonderful hamburgers. The next morning, this is where it really pops. We went to a road that took us up to Cottonwood Pass. Cottonwood Pass Road. Now that was that was wow. We come in from the Gunnison side. I don't know the names of the highways. You know, it's between these two mountains. It's very close together, very tight, very beautiful. The smells are fabulous. I'm wearing the world's most comfortable helmet. And I had the thing wide open because I want to smell the scenery, you know. The speed limit was 40 miles an hour. Even at 40 miles an hour, you felt like you're going too fast because there's so much to absorb, so much, not because the roads were too curvy or too tight, but because there's so much to see and so much to absorb. And it was just, and by the way, that's another theme. The whole trip in Colorado, once I got past Denver, sensory overload. I mean to tell you, you were just, it was really soaking in. So we ride along and we come upon a herd of cattle. These two cowboys, a man and a woman, they've got horses, they've got dogs, and they're herding this herd of cattle. And so we pull over, a couple cars ahead of us, you know, they get the herd split. A couple bulls start fighting, you know, and the cars go on. We talk to the cowboy a little bit, and you know, the bulls get separated. The cowboys use hand signals. Give the dogs signals, the dogs go over to separate the bulls. We sat there for a little bit to let them get ahead of us. Mark and I on our bikes started going down the road, and what we found was the cattle were just kind of disappearing into the trees. Just amazing, you know. Went up the big mountain, got to a place called Taylor Reservoir, and Taylor Park is the area. Fabulous, beautiful trails all over. You can rent ATVs, you can rent motorcycles. As a matter of fact, we're going to take our dirt bikes back there. I think we're going to try to get back there this year. Maybe when the new Himalayans come out, you know, that'd be a lot of fun, right? Then we got all the way up to the Cottonwood Pass. So Cottonwood Pass is when you get up there, it's kind of a small area. It's on the Continental Divide. But the road up to there, you know, that's just amazing. And then the road down from there is just amazing. Cottonwood Pass is also amazing. I'm not trying to minimize that, but I'm just saying, you know. Anyway, that was an amazing day. By the way, we got a hotel in Gunnison. I don't know if I mentioned that already. The next, you know, went home, back to Frisco. Wonderful night, great meal, all that neat stuff. The next morning, I had the bike all loaded up, and Mark had given me a route. By the way, Mark, an excellent motorcycle rider, terrific guide. I really appreciate every minute, every single minute, sincerely, of this trip because of him. He just did wonderful, and I thank you so much. Anyway, he got up. He had given me a route on Highway 9 to Highway 40 to Highway 14 to 125 to 127, I'm sorry, and into Wyoming on 230. And that route was fabulous. He told me what to expect. He said, once you get past, I can't remember the name of the town, he said, there's going to be nothing out there, and nothing but beauty. There was beauty everywhere. And I just fell in love with it. It was just fabulous, and I'm ready to go back. Why did I leave, right? So, got into Wyoming, crossed the line, and immediately there was a sign that said, steep grade. There's some cloud mounds or something like that. Steep grade, you know, use low gear, blah, blah, blah. And then there was another sign, not just shortly past that, it said, cows on road, be careful, you know, basically. It's like, oh my gosh, you know. And then there was a falling rock sign, you know, and by the way, falling rock signs everywhere in Colorado. There were so many falling rock signs, I started to think, is this a town that, you know, we're trying, you know, anyway. So now I've got my steep grade signs, I've got my cattle signs, I've got my falling rock signs. I am waiting for a Sasquatch sign or a Bigfoot sign, you know, it was just amazing. Anyway, these roads were windy, beautiful, amazing views. Just incredible roads. Got to the bottom, big wide open area all the way to Laramie. Got to Laramie, got some juice. Did a little drive around Laramie, you know, checked it out. Interesting little town. Apparently there's some good restaurants there. Maybe I should have stopped. Got on the Interstate 80, and Interstate 80 from Laramie going east is pretty dramatic scenery. I guess that's the best way to put it. The first 100 miles of Nebraska isn't bad, you know, from the west side going east. You know, it slowly, and then after that, it just, I'm going to tell you right now, driving across Nebraska should be a form of punishment. Oh, you were bad. You must get in this car that only goes 50 miles an hour or 60 miles an hour and drive across Nebraska in one shot. That is a torturous route. The Interstate 80 is, let me think about this, 454 miles long. I drove every inch of that in one day. So got back to Iowa that night and got home, and boy, was I wore out. But did 780 miles that day. The whole trip, I did 7 miles short of 2,000 miles, so that'd be 1,993 miles, a little more than that, you know, by tenths. And I just had a ball. And the bike, it toured so well. It toured so well. It did everything I could ever have hoped for. It did more than that. It was just a fabulous machine for the ride. I am so impressed with this motorcycle. So did I at any time think I had the wrong bike? Going out there, fighting the winds, Nebraska, I was tired and wore out, and I thought, oh my gosh, what a battle it has been. And it wasn't that bad. I've been in worse wind wars, you know, on motorcycle, but I was tired. But as soon as I started riding Colorado, and especially on the ride home, like I said, this bike is the right bike. I bought the right bike. I want an Interceptor so bad. That's an Interceptor right there. But I think I did the right thing in buying this particular motorcycle. And I really love this thing. I got 9,500 miles on it now. It performs admirably. It just seems to do everything I ever wanted, you know, and I really appreciate Baxter Cycle. Those guys are just good guys. If y'all are in the market for a newer used Royal Enfield like this one, need a Triumph, classic British motorcycle of any type, parts, accessories, thingamajigs, doodads, build your own touring bike like this one, or maybe an Interceptor like that one, or a nifty 350 like that one, or a classic British bike like this one, or a nifty dirt bike like that one over yonder, which I'm going to work on today. Just cleaned it up. I haven't done that yet since my trip over to South Dakota. Get yourself over to Baxter Cycle in the mighty metropolis of Marnie, Iowa. Or go to baxtercycle.com. Tell those fine folks that Fuzzy, that's me, Fuzzy Biker sent you. You send them a note, an email, a text, or anything like that, Facebook page, Baxter Cycle's Facebook page, Give them a big wahoo! Life is good, my friends. Life is good. Now get out there and ride. Wahoo! Yippee-yi-yay! Yippee-yi-yo! Down the road we go. Beautiful, beautiful machine. Turn the radio on. 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 Turn the radio on.